My mindset is that it's money. So I'm going to try as hard as I can to make this business work. And in the end, if I lose money, it's just money. I think you can't stress yourself out about how much money you put into it or how much time you're giving. I think you have to continuously tell yourself that you're investing for a reason.
Hello, welcome medical entrepreneurs. Welcome to another podcast of Medical Entrepreneur. We have a very special guest with us. We have Angie Kinmann, CRNA, with us today. And she has a great story. Angie, if you don't mind, please introducing yourself and kind of let us know how your journey went into medicine and then where you came from as a medical professional to become a medical entrepreneur.
Hi, my name is Angie Kinmann, nurse anesthetist in North Carolina. I've been in healthcare for 25 years. I graduated, obviously, with my BSN in nursing and started out in critical care. Really loved critical care and just wanted more autonomy and wanted more, I guess you could say, of the adrenaline rush, taking care of really critical ill patients. So I went on to anesthesia school and graduated from Duke in 2008. So I've been a nurse anesthetist for 15 years, and I absolutely love anesthesia. I love my job. I love all aspects of anesthesia, but started getting, this is going to sound a little crazy, but started just getting a little bored with the same thing all the time. I have my own anesthesia company now, so I contract out to a dental office, endo centers, other hospitals. So I was able to make my own schedule in anesthesia, which has been phenomenal. Being my own boss in that arena. I decided to move into aesthetics about a year ago and have opened a place doing aesthetics on the side, which may hopefully one day become a full-time aesthetics as well. So I've just kind of evolved over time, kept learning, kept doing new things, and kept myself from being stagnant in the same place for lots of years.
Well, perfect. Angie, could you tell us a little bit more about kind of your journey into medicine? Like what brought you into becoming a CRNA and kind of your journey there?
When I first graduated high school, everybody goes to community college where be an accountant, and I found that incredibly boring. So I did a couple years of that. I had my daughter at a very young age, and I wanted a career that was going to help support my family and give me other opportunities in the future. So that's what took me to nursing. And nursing kept me interested. I loved the science behind it. I love critical thinking and just the ever-evolving landscape of medicine. So once I was in, and I just have kept growing ever since.
And then how did you go from basically, doing anesthesia to having your own anesthesia company first? Like what was the thing that kind of made you shift into becoming an entrepreneur and building your own thing as opposed to working for others?
So I had worked for 15 years in hospitals. I have worked at Duke, at a trauma center, another trauma center in Raleigh. I worked at a community hospital and had branched out into mainly doing the epidural service. So, 14 years of giving anesthesia and being a hospital employee, I had always moonlighted on the side doing PRN anesthesia as a contractor. And I decided to make the plunge a couple years ago just to go 1099 straight. So that's all I do now is just doing 1099 so that I could be my own boss, work my own schedule, not work weekends and holidays if I don't want, and not have to take call in the hospital for 24 hours overnight if I didn't want to. And it's much more lucrative doing it that way, and I get to build my own life the way I want to.
And then could you tell us about, how you basically, initially I imagine you probably didn't have a lot of business training from your backgrounds. How did you figure out the business aspects of becoming a medical entrepreneur?
So I've been doing a PRN, like I said, contracting since 2009. So when I first started, I was just working and, just getting the paycheck. Well, then I started asking questions about actually having a PLC and then having your actual S-Corp business. And then I taught myself QuickBooks and just being tenacious and asking lots of questions. Everybody who was a 1099 contractor, I would ask them things, whether it was from their tax guy or what do you do about this? What do you do about retirement? What do you do about payroll? So over the years, I have just, like I said, been tenacious, asking questions and figured out what the smartest and best move is when you're going to be a 1099 contractor.
Perfect. And then did you find the transition hard?
No, I didn't really. It was liberating. Like I had already done some base knowledge before I quit the hospital, and I had been working about 70 hours a week for about a year to save enough in a little nest egg where if another COVID happened, I didn't have to worry about any fallout. So I was very strategic about just not leaving the hospital without enough money to fund me for a couple years in the event that we had another world breakout or something and then things shut down again.
Yeah, absolutely. What made you wanted to go into aesthetics and tell us about kind of your journey and your successes in aesthetics, especially just the fact that I think your practice is only a few months old. Is that correct?
We actually only opened our actual space, our office, this month. So we did a little bit in November and then our grand opening was December 2nd. So oddly enough, I had signed up for one of Jennifer's first painless CE retreats in March of 2019. And we were going to go to Destin, and I had signed up for that conference in Botox that year. And then COVID hit and we couldn't travel anywhere. And, all the hospitals had shut down any traveling of employees. So I had to cancel that trip just because UNC Hospital would not let employees do anything. They wouldn't pay for CEUs. They wouldn't do anything at all.
Wow.
So I had originally wanted to take that Botox class then to get into something different and to do a more holistic, approach. Like that's what the whole conference was about, was taking care of yourself, minimizing burnout, healthy yoga, mindfulness, doing things that we need as healthcare providers that we don't do very well at all. So fast forward to the beginning of this year is when I really started the ball rolling again to take the basics course with Kelly Hermans. And we went in July and took that first basics course. We just took the advanced course in November. So since July, we've just been learning, progressing, building, and just getting our aesthetics practice going.
Man, that's great. And then basically, would you mind commenting on, your level of success and how you maybe talk about how you joined the Aesthetic Inner Circle and did that help you or?
Yeah, it has. So when we went to basics, we're all new. I had gone to like an AMET class, one of those national training organizations, which, that gives you some knowledge, but not what you need. So when you start this new journey, you kind of feel like you're all out on your own, especially even knowing 1099 for a business for anesthesia, that is completely different than running a brick and mortar med spa. There's so many things you don't know. So when we went to basics, you guys had actually just launched the Inner Circle pretty much that week. So we joined when we went to basic. And that has been a phenomenal network of having education to help me in this aesthetics business, being able to bounce ideas off of each other, learning pitfalls, looking at business building strategies. It has been really remarkable to have that. And not many people have that kind of a network when they get started. So I'm incredibly grateful for that.
And then could you talk about a little bit about the success that you've had, using some of the software and how, maybe it was, I don't know if, initially you were kind of challenged by technology initially and kind of your overcoming of that?
I'm still challenged by technology, especially when it comes to social media and trying to drive business with all of that. But I'm learning as we go. When I started this journey, I also started F&P school for a postmaster certificate. So I haven't had a lot of time. So here, I knew we were getting ready to open December 2nd. And I really needed to get a funnel out just to kind of invite people to that and get us out there, to get us known. So I just kind of took one weekend and sat down and really learned how to build a funnel by watching the videos, chatting back and forth with Clay. And I was able to build a funnel with 400 people to invite, which was pretty great. And it really did well for us. So we've only been open really since December 2nd when our open house occurred. And I think we just hit 20,000 for sales this month. So I'm super happy about that. It's more than I expected. I expected it to start out really, really slow when we first began. So I'm over the moon of what that did for me.
So basically as we're recording this, is December 12th. Essentially, you've only been open 12 days and you've already done $20,000 on your brand new medical spa. That's incredible, Angie. Great job.
Yeah. We've been doing little bits here and there. Obviously we did Botox on people here and there, but since our actual doors have been open, it's been a great month so far.
Man, that is great. What do you think is your secret to success? I
would have to say tenacity, and I would have to say building relationships. So what a lot of people forget in this industry is there's people behind what you do. And we all get so jaded sometimes in healthcare. And our biggest success has been educating the people and building relationships with the people. And that's been a phenomenal experience for me, because for the last 15 years, I basically say hi to patients, put them to sleep, and they never remember who I am. Anesthesia never really gets the gratification on the back end. It's kind of been a really, really great experience for me as well, this relationship building experience.
And how do you find the relationship difference between, being a hospital, being in a hospital working as a CRNA versus having your own clinic and having patients that are choosing to come to you and, it's not about your insurance, it's not about, whether you take, this thing or that thing. It's people want to choose you because of who you are and they pay cash.
It's been great. And I think, being yourself, be authentic, being genuine and not being somebody else, not being, the other injector down the street or being somebody else that you see on social media, just being yourself and being authentic to who you are and always making sure you're doing what's right for the patient, always safety and always educating them at the same time. I think all of those components, them knowing you care about them knowing you're not going to do something, even if they want it and you don't think it's the right thing, I think that grows your business exponentially.
Always putting the patient first.
Yeah. And there's no pressure. Like there's nobody to tell me that I have to have Botox done in 15 minutes, or there's no one to tell me that I have to 12 patients a day. There's just not the intensity and the expectation that you have when you work for a large entity like a hospital.
No one's running around telling you, oh, your turnover time is taking too long,
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking in my head.
That's another reason why I had to escape the hospital too, because I couldn't take another person who had no idea anything about the medical aspects of what's going on, and then they're sitting there telling you, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, and they don't understand even what's going on with the healthcare of the patient or anything.
Well, and we all know that healthcare has kind of changed, and they're usually run by hedge fund or larger corporations, business people, and they don't really understand that you have a patient sitting there. That every decision should be about the patient. It shouldn't be about time or efficiency, because we're not an assembly line, and I think that gets missed so much in healthcare.
And then is there anything that you feel you mentioned before about persistence, or some people might call it grit. Mm-hmm. Is there anything in particular in your life that had taught you those character traits of being persistent or having grit?
I guess that was just ingrained in me as a child. I mean, my parents came from Appalachia and moved to Ohio and were auto workers for General Motors. And I mean, my dad worked, 2 shifts a day. Like, he worked overtime all the time. He was always working. And I think that just comes from your upbringing, maybe. I've always known that anything that I have in life, I was going to have to work for it. And if you don't work for it, you're probably not going to get it. So I've always been a worker, and I've always worked more than just 40 hours a week. That's never been me to do the least amount of work. Kind of work is ingrained in me. And I just think that comes from your upbringing largely.
And then if someone was watching this or listening to this interview and they were somebody who was maybe stuck in a hospital, not having a good time. One example that we had here on the Medical Entrepreneur podcast was we had a lady who was an RN who worked for a famous hospital chain, here in Dallas. And she was an RN, and she had, I think, 13 patients assigned to her. And one of the patients actually was psychotic and actually, I think, broke the mirror and then took a glass and tried to stab her with the mirror, and was chasing her all over the hospital. They had to call security, but security's down at the other end of the building and, this kind of stuff. And then she came to work the next day after that horrific event, and they assigned her to the same patient. And so, people like that are kind of stuck in like a catch-22, or they got in something and they don't feel like, it's right for them, or, maybe they're not being treated fairly. Any words of advice to someone who is considering being a medical entrepreneur, but is just a little afraid of taking that first step or trying it?
I think that if I had to say anything, COVID should have taught us all a very big lesson in life, and that you never know what's going to happen. So if you're not happy, and that's kind of always been my thing, if you're not happy, then you have to find something else to do. It's scary. Even going 1099 was scary, to leave a hospital job that had security and benefits, but you have to make your life your own, and you only go around the sun once. So if you spend all of your time working in an environment where you're not happy, your life will be over before you know it. So I say go for it. Give yourself a little buffer, like I was talking about, just save a little nest egg and then go for it, whether it's to get an advanced degree or whether it's to start your own practice or, what have you. I think that you have to go for it, and you owe it to yourself and your family.
And then would you say that there's any skills that you maybe have learned from the operating room that apply to kind of the business aspects of, being a medical entrepreneur?
I'm not sure if I would say business aspects. I think that we develop high level functioning procedurally as a CRNA, doing epidurals, spinals, nerve blocks. you get very good at doing procedures. So the procedure aspect of aesthetics is actually quite easy comparative to what we do every day. Business aspects, you're great at organization, you can critically think, and we're trained to think of worst case scenario before they happen. So I think that helps in the business sense, being able to critically think out steps and be very specific and strategic about the decisions you're making.
Absolutely. One of the things that we commonly say is a side effect of some of the medical training is this resulting perfectionism, where, so often in healthcare, you know what I mean? Exactly.
And, I've always thought that I'm not a very type A person when it comes to the OR because, you're in anesthesia and there's some very type A anesthetists and anesthesiologists, like harsh type A. So I always thought I was a little bit laid back until I started this business, but I realized I'm just as type A as everybody else and have the goal of perfectionism and really beat myself up if things don't go the way I want. So yeah, I didn't realize how type A I was until I really started this journey.
Well, man, that's amazing, and your success has been amazing as well. One of the things that I thought was just so amazing also was that basically you joined the Aesthetic Inner Circle and you got the software called Click Practice, which helps you run your med spa and do the marketing for your med spa. And you're able to take basically a pre-existing funnel that we created in the account, and you were able to figure out how to customize it, get it on the internet, and then send messages to your list of people. And was able to have an event where you did, I think you said just under $10,000 in one event. And I was just very, very blown away that you were able to accomplish all of that, especially just like the fact that you just started like this month, basically.
Click Practice, it seemed a little bit intimidating, but when I really got in there, it's actually so intuitive and it's so easy to change things around. So I had a website that I had previously built through GoDaddy, and you have to get on the phone with them, and you're consulting with them constantly, and you're not really changing anything because WordPress is incredibly hard to manage. So Click Practice is super easy. It's kind of plug and play, really. Once you get in there, like I'm building my website through Click Practice now, and it's so much easier than I ever expected.
For sure, especially compared to WordPress.
Oh, gosh, I can't do anything on WordPress, so I'm on the phone with GoDaddy for 2 hours to get one sentence changed. So this is much easier for my life.
I could tell you the hundreds of hours I lost trying to figure out plugins and these kind of thing.
And that's the thing that we don't know. Like, coming from healthcare and medicine, you get employed from a hospital, you don't do any marketing, you don't do any business stuff, you don't have to worry about it. So you literally kind of are adrift when you first start because you don't know how to do these things. Absolutely. So it's definitely been value to me to be able to hook Google to it, send out Google review requests, build my website, build funnels, and just keep everything in one place. So that has tremendously helped.
I just got to say, once again, great job. And I love your persistence, and then just the fact that you have the confidence to try something that initially seems difficult and just go for it, is just, having that grit or that persistence is just amazing. As a great character trait to have,
Oh, well, thank you. I have that motto in my head. I can't remember who said it first, get rich or die trying. And that's kind of what I'm sticking to. Yeah.
I think it's you and 50 Cent have that too.
Yeah, that's right. 50. I can't remember who it was.
And then, if you don't mind asking, can you tell us a little bit more about your kind of your personal life and kind of how all this has been working with you as a person? Do you find that having a business has helped you expand as a person because you're learning new things, or do you find that you're having a business is stressful, or what? You describe kind of a little bit more about the personal Angie, if we were sitting down at a dinner table, what would you be like? How is it with all this stuff going on?
So just a little bit about my personal life. I've been married for 22 years. I have a daughter who's a nurse in Duke CTICU, and she's a traveler. She's in APRN school as well to be an acute care nurse practitioner. Which I'm hoping. So my whole goal in this business is to, grow it out and make it a family business. And eventually she can run that when I'm tired and want to retire.
That's very wise, by the way.
Yeah, I want to leave a legacy for her. And so I can sip margaritas in Florida and not have to worry about money rolling in. But this has given me, going 1099 away from the hospital, first of all, improved my life so much, being able to make my own schedule. But I'm probably happier now than I have ever been in my career and in healthcare. I'm doing 3 days a week in anesthesia, and I'm doing 2 days a week at aesthetics, some Saturdays. So this has just given me so much more capability to spend time with my family, to make my schedule the way I want it. It's a little bit stressful getting it started, but the stress is worth it because it's not the stress of doing 48 hours straight in the hospital doing epidurals and being away from my family. You trade one thing for another, but it's very manageable, and I'm very happy with my life right now.
Man, that is beautiful. And I'll just say, like, one thing, I was actually talking to Jennifer about this the other day because, when we first met, it was actually in a hospital. She was working in OB, and I was an anesthesiologist in the main OR. Basically, we were talking about like how starting a business is stressful initially, but to me, it's a lot less stressful than our everyday lives as healthcare providers. One thing I felt like, I was Q3 when I first started, in the hospital there. And it was a stressful call, every call, just because stuff would come in, and we were in a rural area, like one of two hospitals in this kind of large, kind of rural area, and so all sorts of weird stuff would roll in from all the local, like smaller local cities and stuff. And every call was stressful. But then the worst part was you finish one call, and then you have 2 days before you're on call again. It's just this constant recurring,
I had actually, so for the past probably 6 years of my anesthesia career, I was a chief anesthetist for about a year and a half. At some point, that was a really stressful job, probably my least favorite job of my life. And then I branched into doing epidural service. So I was doing 48 hours straight on the weekend. And then you would do 24-hour calls at night. And sometimes you were up the entire 24 hours, C-sections. Epidurals, like sometimes you never slept, sometimes you did sleep, but just like you said, you would have that 24-hour shift and you'd be over and you'd go home and you'd be like, thank God I'm home. And then just, clockwork, you're starting it all over again. So just the time away from family, the stress of that job, and, you're always on performance at a hospital with expectations and protocols and different personalities. The stress in healthcare has gotten exponentially higher. So I'm glad that I'm stepping back and doing things the way I want to do them now.
Also, just what I felt was like building a business is stressful, or figuring out new things are stressful, but then if you do it for yourself, it becomes an asset that you own forever. If you're stressed out on call, well, you get your window, and then you're back, and you don't get it. You just get whatever your pay is, and that's it. Versus like like for example, for you figuring out like the funnel and click practice, like now you know how to market any event you ever want to do for the rest of your life. It's the same thing, So
in training, I mean, you invest in yourself and you invest in your business, and that's what helps it grow. And ongoing learning. Like, I don't know a lot about click practice, but I'm figuring it out every day.
Man, I'm so glad. I know it may sound trite, but I'm just so proud also, just like to see you go after it, and then just to be so successful. And I just have a feeling that you've kind of always been maybe like a little bit on the quiet side, but always successful.
I kind of stand back and assess before I kind of let myself really show, if that makes any sense. I have to assess the situation, and then once I figure out I'm comfortable with it, then it's fast forward. I don't like to give up, and I just kind of take it and go. And I can tell you that Kelly Herman's training has been phenomenal for all of us in the CRNA industry that want to branch into aesthetics. She's phenomenal as an educator and a trainer. And what you and Jennifer have built with her with clip practice and giving us the tools we need, that's just irreplaceable.
Wow, thank you so much. And the Kelly Herman's training is the Beautify Academy. And so
Yes.
there's so many people that have been able to escape the hospital, kind of the normal. I wouldn't say it's like a terrible life, because there are people that actually seek that out. But then once you get in there and you start doing Q3 call and you start missing time with your children, and it just kind of compounds, and you're like, wait a minute, like I did all this work and training to get here, but you're like, I'm the last person on the list to be taken care of,
And we're horrible about that as healthcare providers in general, just self-care, because you're always showing up to perform. You spend all this time, and it's a great career. I love anesthesia, and I am so fortunate that I'm in the career I am. But like you said, it takes a toll on your own life as well, because you give a lot to have that career.
Absolutely. And then now it seems more than ever, you have so many layers of management and bureaucracy and these kind of things.
To the point where they will actually say, we don't have to follow standards. We just need to do what we need to do.
That's what I started to see. That's one of the reasons why I felt like I really had to escape mainstream medicine, was that there was this constant push for more and more revenue, which basically boiled down to being faster and faster with patients, which at some point you go too fast, and now you're making more mistakes. And then there was never another side to it where people were like, hey, these are our customers, and because they're our customers, we want to really deliver a high quality product. It was always, hey, there's this many people, run them through as fast as possible and get more people.
That is so true. And I'm trying to be really intentional with this business to not let that happen. I know that you want to, get so many tox appointments and you want them to last 15 minutes, but there is a personal component that I'm really, really being intentional to try to uphold. I don't want somebody to ever feel like I'm rushing them through. So I'm giving myself the grace for that as well, and just making sure that I'm making it a personable business and not get into the thought process like, mainstream healthcare with that.
What I've seen is that the aesthetics business in particular, the connection and the payoff in terms of like that personal connection is so much greater than what you see in mainstream medicine. Like, I actually remember one time where I'd done a spinal cord stimulator implant, which is like a little wire that goes in the epidural space in the cervical spine. And I'd spent a long time doing it because it was actually a police officer that in order for him to actually be a police officer, he couldn't take any pain medications. You can't have a police officer taking pain meds with a gun and driving around, right? Or hopefully you don't have that.
That's probably safe.
But it was like, I think I spent like 3 or 4 hours working on it because he had a lot of spinal stenosis. And then I got done and the guy's like, oh, hey, thanks, doc, appreciate it. And then that same day I went to go see Jennifer in the med spa, like after I got done with all my procedures. And her patient, she had done, some Botox and fillers and some of this. And her patient had brought her like a Louis Vuitton bag. And I was just like,
oh, wow.
It's just a different expectation,
Aesthetics is such a weird field to me now that I've been in it, because you're almost like a cross between a hairdresser and a nurse anesthetist. It's like you combine the two, right? Because they want to come and talk and tell you all the secrets and just have somebody to vent to while at the same time you're doing a medical procedure. So it's an interesting dynamic.
I mean, and I'll tell you, like, because as a physician, I saw like thousands upon thousands of patients in pain clinic, and I would tell you that there was some component of that also in pain clinic, but the patients that come to an aesthetic clinic, they're coming to they're people by default that want to improve themselves, So they're not people that are like, oh, I'm so sick, I need to get this in order for me to survive. It was more like, hey, I look like this and I'd really like to look a little better. Can you help me? And so because of that, they're coming from like a different point of view, if you will, You're
not curing an illness. And, that's what drew me to labor and delivery also when I did the epidural service for so many years, is it's the only happy place in the hospital. It's the only place where people had immense joy and just, you were celebrating life. You weren't fixing things that were already broken, and you weren't trying to cure people, whether it was from trauma or illness. So that's what I loved about labor and delivery. And that's what I love about aesthetics. You have people that are in a good place in their life and you're kind of celebrating and enjoying, just not so much illness.
And then would you say anything to someone who is maybe like they're starting their career in healthcare and they kind of, are trying to figure out what they want to do? Is there any kind of life lessons that you've learned, being that you've mastered anesthesia, you've mastered running your own anesthesia business, and now you already have a great grip on mastering your aesthetic or med spa practice?
I guess my biggest advice is that healthcare is still a great career choice, and there's so many things you can do with it. And I would never just stop learning and become stagnant. So I think that's the best thing that I did for myself was I worked in a variety of hospitals, a variety of settings. My anesthesia now is at a dental implant center. You just keep moving and you keep learning. Go on and get a different degree. Just keep advancing. Just don't stay stagnant.
And if there's someone who is maybe they're CRNA and they're in the OR and they might be listening to this on their shift or when they're headed home, and they're like, man, I really like the idea of aesthetics. I love aesthetics, and I go get Botox. It doesn't seem that hard compared to all the stuff that you do every single day. I mean, it's really kind of nothing compared to like an inner scaling block or something. What advice would you have for somebody like that?
I mean, I hate for us to sound egocentric, but it really, comparative to anesthesia, is not hard. It's a super easy skill set. It's just finding your niche, being able to build the business. You have to remember that you don't have patients dumped in your lap. There's going to be a lot of work and a lot of growth that has to happen. So just like any business, if you're going to go into aesthetics, it's a great field, but you have to remember you're probably not going to make money for yourself, as in paying yourself a paycheck or a salary for probably 2 years. You have to grow a business in order to get, the dividends on the back end. So it's not an easy field that I would say jump into it and expect it to replace your entire anesthesia salary, because it's not going to do that. You have to grow it. You're the one who has to find the clients, and you have to foster it.
And as you may have seen in the Aesthetic Inner Circle, we actually had another CRNA who actually put in her resignation, I think it was last month, because she actually went full-time in aesthetics.
I did, and that's great. And she probably has spent that time growing and fostering her business.
Absolutely. I think with the rate that you're growing, you'll be, if should you decide to do that, you'll be at it, because you got definitely got a home run right out of the gate. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I hope so. Just building connections, keeping the connections I have, and partnering with different businesses, and just growing the clientele base. I hope my goal starting out in January is to keep at least what we made in December. And I hope to have a laser or a device in first quarter of this year.
Wow, that's fast. That's great. One thing I see is that it kind of a constant level of just kind of what you describe as constant level of growth all the time for you, constant level of self-improvement. Is there any kind of mindset shifts that you personally have had that have led to your success? Is there anything that you would want to share with other people regarding mindset?
The only thing, I know people get really stressed out when they first start this business that they don't have enough clients or they're not getting enough money in. And, like I told you, I had saved money and set up a nest egg before I ever left the hospital. So I've been able to pay cash for just about everything I've done in this business. And my mindset is that it's money. So I'm going to try as hard as I can to make this business work. And in the end, if I lose money, it's just money. I think you can't stress yourself out about how much money you put into it or how much time you're giving or how much money you're not making in anesthesia, because you're not going to make as much as at first. And I think you have to continuously tell yourself that you're investing for a reason and not be worried about the salary coming in.
Absolutely. And then any other words of wisdom or any other topics you think would be useful to have other medical entrepreneurs hear about?
Just make sure you keep training and keep educating yourself and, trying to be the best you can in whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's anesthesia or aesthetics or anything else. And you can do it. We can all do it. You just have to be persistent and give yourself grace, because it takes time.
I'll say though, I think that more than anything, there's kind of different. Kind of what I see is that, especially for people in medicine, because we're all kind of trained to be perfectionists and never make mistakes, and mistakes are so dangerous, or so I shouldn't say dangerous. Mistakes are so looked down upon or so scary in medicine, just because of legal liability, that kind of thing. That a lot of times when you move over to the real world, in my mind operates much differently, and usually the people that are the most successful, especially as medical entrepreneurs or really any kind of entrepreneurs, are kind of people that launch things, or they're willing to try things even if it's not perfect. So we always have a phrase, it's done is greater than perfect. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that's true. So I could have waited to open a spot and open a business until I'd gone through 3 years of aesthetics training, or had gone to every training that I possibly could. But I know that I can do it, and I know that this is not that difficult of a task, and you learn as you go. You make mistakes, but then you learn from your mistakes, whether it's making a bad business decision or purchasing something you probably shouldn't have. You just learn as you go. And that's the only way to get good at anything, is to learn from your own mistakes. Set out and try it and adapt.
This is true. Yeah, absolutely. Basically, it sounds like you're kind of building your med spa, and perhaps even your daughter may eventually come to work with you as well. You mentioned before that you're going to make this business kind of like a family business. Do you feel that having a family business kind of helps your family as well? Or is there any kind of components of business and family that seem to jive well together?
Well, it will. It'll be a legacy. So, if I can build this business and get it where I need to be, I'm 48 now. By the time I'm 55, I want to work part-time. I want to work as little as I want to or as much as I want to. So by then she will have been an advanced practice nurse for a few years, and I'm hoping she can take the reins, give me the freedom to travel or, do what I want to do to enjoy the rest of my life. My goal was always to retire at 55, but now it's kind of doing aesthetics on the side at 55.
That's perfect. Because you never want to fully retire. I learned that the hard way myself, and then if you ever look at if you ever want to see something that's really scary, is look at the actuary data for people who retire, especially for men. It's like 2 years, you know, really scary.
You're in medicine. We all see the surgeons who have worked until they're like 75 and they retire and then they drop dead of a heart attack or they get Alzheimer's. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to work till I'm 70. I want to enjoy my life and not spend my entire life working constantly. That's the impetus for everything that I have done over the past probably 5 to 10 years, is gearing up for that.
Do you mind if I ask a little bit more about like your geographic area? Because a lot of people feel like they can't start a med spa unless they're like in a big city, you know, like, you know, Los Angeles or New York or, you know, some of these, you know, huge place. Could you maybe talk more about kind of your location and how, you know, what it's like to have a med spa, like maybe not in such a large city?
Yeah, so I am east of Raleigh. So we're about 15 minutes from downtown Raleigh. So we definitely are close to a big city, more like a suburb. You know, there's a lot of med spas in Raleigh, and it's a very popular thing. I'm fortunate being on the east side of Raleigh that there is not really any med spas in the little 3 cities that we're kind of connected to. Not that they're not coming, but I think that there is a need everywhere. And even if there are med spas in the same city you're in, there's a need for aesthetics all over the place. It's a very untapped market that I think is going to continue to grow.
That's very true. And the data really shows that. It shows year-over-year growth in aesthetics and med spa, anti-aging, all that is consistently growing as the population ages. You know, it used to be like a long, long time ago, it would be like people would kind of, quote, retire, and then they would, you know, sit around the house, watch TV. My grandfather would go to like the local, you know, Legions Club or the you know, Veterans of Foreign Wars, that kind of thing, you know. And, you know, people have like the little social group or whatever, and that's kind of what they did, and that was it, you know. And then, you know, now so much like people that are, you know, in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s are way, way more active than ever before. I mean, I had a patient the other day that was in his late 80s. And he was flying around all over doing real estate deals and you know, all this kind of stuff. And I was like,
oh, wow.
You know? So it really, he didn't look 80 either. He looked maybe like worst case scenario, like early 70s, you know, maybe late 60s. And so that there's starting to be like kind of divergence in even the way people age because of all these new treatments.
And I think that we're focusing more on healthcare in this country now, or not healthcare, in wellness, even more so. So, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, you really just didn't hear about wellness, eating healthy, exercise, marathons. Like, you didn't see all of that in the 80s and 90s. But I think there's a much greater focus on being healthy and taking care of yourself now.
And even just the science itself. I mean, we didn't know what telomeres were, you know, until recently. We didn't really quite understand. And I honestly don't think we truly fully understand the whole aging process 100%, you know.
No, we don't.
We understand some main components of it, but it's still somewhat of a mystery, you know.
Yeah, I have my retirement plan already. We have a place with my mom down in Florida already, in a little retirement village, and they golf and have golf cart rodeos, and I've already got my retirement plan set.
Absolutely. I mean, I think people are going to, like, the oldest person I've seen so far that I've actually met in person was 117, and it was a lady in Jamaica.
Oh, my goodness.
She didn't really look that old. I mean, you know, she definitely didn't look young, but, you know, like she didn't look like 117, you know. And I asked her, like, what was the secret, you know? I'm sure everybody asked her that too. But, you know, she said that one of the things is that in the early part of her life, she had a lot of struggles and difficulty, but she always would focus on the positive, and that she learned to just let things go. She'd had a lot of negative things that happened to her. And then from those experiences, she just learned to just try to stay as happy as possible and let things go. And I really do believe there's something to that as well.
I do as well. I think gratitude has to be a huge part of everybody's life. Nobody leaves this life unscathed. Somehow, somewhere, you're going to have a lot of hardship that you don't expect. I mean, my dad committed suicide 3 years ago, a little before. You don't know what life's going to bring. So you get through the hurdles, but you have to have gratitude and you have to have happiness. And that's what I do most every day. I'm just really happy for what I have, what I've been given. And I try not to focus on the negative things that have happened in my life.
That explains a lot. I think that's one of your keys to success too, for sure, you know?
Yeah. You just can't sit in that place. You have to move on and keep enjoying your life, because you, like I said, you only get around the sun once.
Oh, that's so great. if someone wanted to follow you or wanted to find out more about you, how might they do that, Angie?
They could follow my website for my aesthetics, but I don't usually do a podcast. I don't do a podcast,
Sure.
anything like that. So it's basically email or Facebook.
And then we'll definitely put a link to your website into the show description as well, so people can check out the beautiful website you built as well using ClickPractice. So, and then one other question is kind of maybe a little sad and kind of related to from the conversation we had a minute ago was I don't know if you've seen the numbers for the amount of suicides for healthcare providers. It's like it's almost like a straight line upwards. It's really crazy.
It's hitting every sector of our nation. Yeah.
And I think a lot of it's in healthcare too, just because of all the stresses from it. And, even like I tell a lot of people is like in healthcare, your payment is essentially fixed by the government because, if you're in what's considered mainstream medicine, you get paid by Medicare or private insurance. They all bill through the Medicare system. They all use the same CPT codes. And so the government essentially either directly or indirectly sets the pay scale. And as we know, they haven't actually kept up that pay scale with inflation for the last 30 years and definitely not for the last 3 years. I run into a lot of people they feel like they're working harder than they ever have before in mainstream healthcare, and they're just kind of like getting less than they ever have. Is there anything that you would say to people that are maybe, kind of feeling depressed? Maybe they're, thinking like, hey, there's nothing I can do. I just need to end this. Like for somebody who's maybe not, totally suicidal, but somebody who's kind of like heading down that path. It seems like you have a different viewpoint of those things. Is there anything that you might share with a person like that?
So I guess the thing that you have to keep in mind is it's just money. And I understand that money is how you live and it's how you survive. But in this country, we have more things than the majority of the world. And we don't necessarily need all of those things. So at the end of the day, it's just money. And you can make a life a different way. If you're not happy in your healthcare job, you can find another life, take another career path. I just tell myself all the time, I know I would be fine if I lived in a 1-bedroom house with my husband and didn't really have that much money coming in, because it's just money. That's not what makes happiness. Like we talked about, gratitude, enjoying what you have and the people that you have, because at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Oh, so true. What a great point.
So, anybody that has those thoughts, reach out for help, because there's help out there.
For a lot of people, the kind of what I see, especially when I talk to other colleagues, is like, especially those in anesthesia or surgery, they were kind of like almost, dare I say, like selected or like kind of like tagged as somebody who, like, they say, oh, you do really good on your test scores, or like, you're really good at math and science, you should go into healthcare, that kind of thing. And so they take like the best of the best and some of the best minds, most creative people, and they put them into the healthcare field, which is essentially heavily regulated and controlled by the government. And then they end up doing kind of treatments that are like almost like algorithms, where it's like, oh, we just follow this path. It's like this, and you do this. It doesn't matter what you think, because the insurance is only going to pay for one of these 2 treatments. And
medicine's been taken out of medicine for sure. It's all protocolized.
Yeah, for sure. I think just taking away that creativity and that the spark, like you described initially, like the fact that you're always learning, you're always growing. Like without that, I always say life is binary. You're either like 1 or 0, you're either alive or dead. You're either growing or you're dying.
That's actually really good. I've never heard that, but I really like that.
I think it's really true in nature too, because you worked in the trauma ICU, as you mentioned before. I'm sure you must have had many. You have many patients that have like brain injuries.
Oh yes.
And then what I'm talking about, like especially like we had them a lot in Miami, where I did my trauma ICU there, and like there would be a lot of I call them kids like in their early 20s that would be using like the motorcycles, like the Kawasaki's and those kind of things, to go like really high speeds on the freeway, and they get into an accident and they have a traumatic brain injury. And those people that came in who had a terrible traumatic brain injury then were essentially brain dead. You could tell based on their physiology, the way they looked, even just like how many pressors you had to use. Like there was you could almost tell before you ever got the studies on the brain if this person was brain dead or not, because I think there's a certain kind of life force that you like when somebody's trying to live and they're trying to survive, you can kind of tell that, versus when somebody's, for example, waiting for an organ harvest. Trauma
medicine is definitely intense. I can attest to that.
I think there's something very special about, having that will and going forward. And I think a lot of that is necessary to grow. And so what I see for a lot of people in medicine is that once they get into this kind of fixed, I wouldn't say like artificial kind of world where they're not making decisions anymore. It's like, oh, well, the insurance company only pays for this, so we do this for everybody. That's the way it works. Then they kind of lose some of that spark, some of that, drive.
Yep, everybody's angry and everybody's pessimistic at this point.
That's
pretty much how healthcare is.
It's funny, I actually got a call from a new grad the other day, and I explained this to them, and they were like, oh, okay, so what should I do? I said, just finish your training nonetheless, because you've already started it. I would never, like, if I had to go back in time, I would never not, go through medicine or train for it, because I felt like just the training alone was such a amazing experience. The ability, that's like you have done, like, to help a woman have a child, to deliver a baby, or save someone's life. I mean, those are things that you just never forget, But that doesn't mean that you always have to sacrifice yourself to deliver those results to other people, because I feel in some cases, if you do a really great job with, some cheek filler, you can make somebody cry tears of joy as well,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been good. I've so enjoyed this path I'm on, for sure.
Well, man, Angie, it's such a pleasure talking to you. I love your attitude. I love your persistence. And I love the fact that you're always so focused on the positive. It's a really great lessons for everybody who's listening to this. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the Medical Entrepreneur Podcast. You've been like a breath of fresh air, and your success is astounding. And definitely, I have no doubt it comes from within, Yeah,
well, keep those prayers coming. We're going to keep this going. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Angie.